I met some guy named Joe in the locker room. He came up to me like, "Hi, my name's Joe. How you doing? I don't know you."
Joe, by the way.
Oh, nah.
Every time I scratch my head when they make a pick, then I start to say myself I'm back in love. Lowered expectations, and I'm going with the flow. Ow! Excuse me, I like the mangoes. I'm on down. I guess I want the good show. Yeah. Every project that they take starts to look pretty good. When I see their RAS, I'm back in love. Back in love again. Back in love. When they put their arms around Joe, I get tickled inside. I want to love them forever. Misgivings I must hide. When I read the scout reports, I feel like giving in. Then I read what Hobson wrote, I'm back in love. Who they? Right back in love again. Seems like back in love again.
Welcome to the number one Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Daddy McDuke. I'm joined as always by Dr. Roger Electric Esmoji, and we have a very special and handsome young man on the show. Brilliant mind, who everybody is using his research, his numbers, whenever they talk about prospects, including the Cincinnati Bengals getting the best prospect ever. I'm talking about Mr. Kent Lee Platte.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be on.
Time to Platte.
Thank you. Yes.
We're going to Platte like it's 1999, Mr. Kent.
Yes. Or 1987.
Or 1987.
When they first started tracking defensive ends. And Mr. Kent, tell us what happened in 1987. From then until now. Yes.
So the combine started a couple of years earlier. That I think it was 85 or something like that. But it was all pen and paper and like the most hectic, insane. There's literal books written about how crazy those things were. They weren't exactly keen on keeping astute records and making sure that everything was tracked properly. But we've since been able to kind of retroactively go and collect all of that data. We've got thousands of prospects. We're up to almost 30,000 prospects. Yeah. Specifically for the Bengals, we've got over 2,000 defensive end prospects that we have tracked. And the Bengals took the number one guy in that entire database.
Ever defensive end. We're done. I just want you, hold on, before we show these stats, because it's the RAS. Everybody's seen the RAS and they see the name Matt Baum, but they don't know that if you're a Rastafarian like I am, and you are closely following these, they don't know that this is the Raz father right here. This guy is the guy behind it. Nobody knows this. Very few people, not enough people. But so these are the beautiful graphics that he puts together that take all the different numbers of a prospect and show where they rank. Green, very good. Elite, right? The only thing we see with Jamar Stewart, he's a 10.0. He could have been what, like 11 or 12 if he followed my diet guidance, put a little bit more on weight, little weight more. He can go over 10. That is insane.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So Kent is the guy who creates these. He puts them together.
Yes. Everybody uses it. Yeah.
And everybody uses them. And guess who has him on the show? Number One Bengals podcast has him as a guest. And
yes.
May I say, elephant in the room here. When I look up at these two guys at the top of my screen, I just gotta ask the question.
Right.
Any relation?
Well, I will say our mustaches are relation. They come from the same mustache family of the bold and yes,
bold
ambitious
and
look.
Yeah.
Yes. Not everybody
made
has
from
that
the same material. They don't always talk about that.
Exactly.
It's all made from the same stuff.
That's true. Now, Kent, we were talking about this number one pick of the Bengals.
Yes.
The Bengals took him at 17.
Yes.
And I asked the silly question, why, if he's the best ever RAS-wise, Was he available at 17? And you said, I'm going to tell you on the show, but it sounds like the poor guy has a problem finishing sex.
Yes, sometimes guys have problems, especially as they age. That can become a problem. I don't know any of these people.
That's the story behind divorces 12 through 14 for me.
This is what keeps it going, and some guys don't realize that until much later in life. But with Jamar Stewart, this comes down to production versus athletic traits, and you have a guy with all these athletic traits. Why is he still available?
Yeah.
We've seen guys like him before. It's not super common. We had Danielle Hunter a few years ago who had 4.5 sacks. Not a few years ago. God, I feel old saying a few years. But he had 4.5 sacks in college as well. His issue was all technique. He had one pass rushing move. He would put his arm against the lineman and just kind of push him. He ended up going to Minnesota with Mike Zimmer, and he had a lot of training on technique and learning a pass rushing plan, counters, and all that. And he became one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I don't think that is as much of a parallel, even though the stats are literally the same, 4.5 sacks, because I don't think it's a technique issue as much with Jamar Stewart.
Okay.
The bigger issue I think with him is going to be usage and how you deploy him in the NFL, and then cleaning up the problems that he has. The parallel that I was able to find with that, and it's not a perfect parallel, nothing ever is, but Ziggy Ansah, many years ago, drafted by the Lions in the first round, 5th overall. Supremely talented athlete, but they had him at like 270 pounds playing defensive end, linebacker, interior tackle, and safety even on some plays, which is ridiculous. He doesn't need to be used like that. The Lions had Jim Schwartz as their head coach, and he was running a wide 9 scheme. He had his defensive ends always very wide, and he was just like, why don't we just put him at end and have him rush the passer every single play? Novel concept for a pass rusher. So he did that, and Ziggy Ansah, put up 12 sacks more than once in his career. He became a good passer. He had some injury issues that eventually led to him getting out of the NFL. But sometimes it's just as simple as the way that he's being used in that college scheme is not the way that he's going to be deployed in the NFL. And care about what they did in college. It's all about what you think they can do in the pros.
I appreciate the generosity. I appreciate the fact that you're giving the benefit of the doubt. I think there are even people who love the Bengals and say we're not great at picking
at developing players. Well, that's another problem. Yeah,
or developing now. I mean,
or holding on to players,
But I mean, like, look, one person tweeted this. Kent, he said, "I feel like this is another John Ross. John Ross was a tremendously gifted athlete. He was incredibly fast, maybe the fastest ever, or something like that, from what I recall." How do we know? Put my mind at ease. Put my heart at ease, Kent. How do I know this is not?
Look at these numbers he put together.
Yeah, no, I don't want numbers. I don't want numbers.
Hold on. I'm gonna Kent. John Ross had very narrow shoulders. He wasn't built like a football player.
No, and the issue with John Ross came down to injuries. I was amazed that he was drafted at all, let alone as high as he was, considering
first round draft pick. We took him over Mahomes.
John Ross, I tried to tweet all of his injuries one time. This is before his draft, and I ran out of space and in the 180 characters ever just listing the injuries that he had at that point. The guy was a walking infirmary. So you don't want to have a guy like that. Jamar Stewart doesn't have that as an issue. He's got other issues. He's got his own problems.
Yeah. I mean, and the clip that Daddy showed, I saw the quarterback just slip right through his butt.
Yes, well, that's his issue. So, but
how is that fixable? How is that fixable? Joe Burrow was not a specimen. I don't imagine his RAS was the best RAS ever, but I believe Joe Burrow to be the greatest quarterback that God has ever sent down to earth. And he sent him down in a spaceship, Kent, but that's a different show.
He hangs out with a lot of Hollywood types, just so you know.
We're talking about mutants, not aliens. It's a different conversation entirely. Jamar Stewart does have some problems with finishing his tackles. That's technique. That is something that has to be cleaned up. I mentioned there's some things he has to clean up. That's something that you can fix. Missed tackles is one of those things where there's guys that have had that problem their entire college career just because they weren't coached up very well. Tackling is a fundamental thing. It's one of the most basic parts of playing football on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. I remember one of my favorite stats was that Larry Fitzgerald finished his career with more tackles than drops, which is just a bonkers stat. But tackling is fundamental. And when you have problems with it, you need to get that fixed. And sometimes it isn't fixable. The fact that the Bengals took him this high means that at the very least, they believe that it is. It's something they believe that they can fix, or at the very least, they can mitigate that problem enough by letting him do more to win.
Our offensive line coach is somebody whose name that we don't know.
Yeah,
we don't know.
A lot of people. We have a lot of change, but Kent, here's the thing: we have Miles Murphy, who before the show you told me is what
9.71.
9.71. That's very good. He wasn't able to contribute immediately. Shamar might be even more of a project. We are trying to win right now. We don't even know how long Trey Hendrickson will be here. We need the pass rush to be better because the secondary is only
Joe Burrow,
okay.
I'm sorry to tell our fans this. Joe Burrow, in terms of quarterbacking, is a middle-aged quarterback.
Right.
He is getting there.
He's had some bad. Yeah.
The thing about win now, the win now concept is every team that is sitting in any kind of a good spot, they're all thinking about winning now.
Right.
But you should never draft to win right now, because these are college players. These are players that are coming out of college. If you're the first overall team or in that top 10, your roster ain't ready to win now. But if you're a team picking later in the round, your roster is ready to win right now. You're already winning.
Right.
So you try to get those incremental fixes to try to fix things, not just I need to get a guy that's 10 sacks right now. You chase that, you're going to start losing resources and you're going to get weak elsewhere.
Well, that is the problem we've had. We talked about in our last show is the Bengals don't have the luxury of drafting BPA because they didn't get anything done in free agency. They waited too long. Then they had to do those big contracts last minute, right? So they end up with, we talked about Shamar, they end up with a guy like Demetrius Knight, who is a 45-year-old linebacker, okay?
Junior, by the way.
Right, but junior.
We didn't even get the senior one. We got the junior one.
Well, I think they if they really wanted, they're worried about winning now, they were probably looking at senior too. This is the thing. You end up with a guy like this. He's a linebacker. He's 25. He's old. He's creaky. Look at those. Those knees barely work. And this is the guy they get. And Kent, as well, we'll finish watching these clips, and then we're going to show the RAS. But, I mean, great. He looks great. But second round, Kent, do you see it? Do you see him going in the second round making any sense?
So the Detroit Lions, I mentioned I'm a Lions fan. The Detroit Lions picked up the lowest value positions across the NFL. And it seems like that's their goal, is to find the lowest values. They trade up for wide receivers. They get running backs early in the first round. They get tight ends early. They get linebackers early. And safeties and nose tackles. They don't pay a whole lot of attention to positional value, and they still ended up improving their team. One of the things that we can learn from that when we're looking at other teams is the high value positions. Those are high value for a reason, because they have the most immediate impact. But it's important when you're team building not to worry just about immediate impact, but long-term impact. One of my favorite examples to use is back when the Ryan brothers were still a thing in the NFL. Running the Jets, they had a nose tackle named Mike DeVito. And if you don't know who Mike DeVito is, most people didn't. But Mike DeVito was a good nose tackle. And he got injured one year. And that defense completely imploded, completely fell apart because of a guy that most people didn't know the name of, who was a focal part of making sure that defense ran on all cylinders all the time. If you have a team that runs a lot of front seven looks where they have their linebackers blitzing, or they rely on that pressure from their front four, losing one of your key players can completely crumble any game plan that you have. And it's not a common coaching trait to be able to fill in those spots reliably. So it may be a lower value position, and he may be older than most prospects. That's a pretty common thing right now because of the COVID year, extra year of eligibility. There's a lot of older players coming out in this draft. But it's still a position that the team feels like they need to be able to run an efficient offense. And they need to have a guy that they have contract control under while they have this Super Bowl window open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you described, Kent, is some would say is the story of the Cincinnati Bengals as well. Our team imploded after losing Jesse Bates.
Yes.
Yeah,
Some would say that.
Yes, I would say that.
But
I
some
said it before
me
we lost.
and that you. We both hold that.
I
point
made a
of
whole
view.
video saying don't
We
check
made
out
a whole
on it,
video
yeah.
about this issue.
So Demetrius, it looks like you believe in him and you think, look, maybe it's a reach, but he's filling a need that you have. You know, okay, he's a little older, but here's the thing. Remember, when he's up for a second contract, they'll be like, oh, you're close to 30. We don't give, he's going to be in the age of the third contract, right? I mean, he is older than Jamar Chase. who just got his new contract. So he's going to be on his third contract when his rookie deal expires. But yeah, I mean, look, if like you said, look, the new guy, Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, he feels like this guy is what he needs. He feels like this guy's going to, they're going to improve tackling and the speed. They got a lot more fast on the defensive end.
Yeah.
So if that's what he wants, let's give him what he wants.
Now, Kent, since we're on round 2, may I ask a question that's been really sizzling my brain hairs
of
for
course.
For the past day?
I wondered what that was. I thought it was just smoke.
Yeah. Nope. It is a thought. And the thought is, I'm thinking about round 2, and I believe, Sidor Sanders went in round 2?
He went in round 1. That was your first guy. Oh, Sidor Sanders. Sidor Sanders went in round 5, right? Went all the way down to round 5.
Okay. So right now the Bengals are picking this older gentleman, and Sidor Sanders is available? I mean, what sense does this make? Is it collusion? Some have said it's collusion. Some have said the NFL got together and they pulled, a Colin Kaepernick on Sidor Sanders. And I'm here for knowing the truth. You know what? You can't handle the truth, Kent. So what do you think?
I don't think it was collusion because I don't think the NFL teams. I don't think that they are capable of passing on a player that they believe can actually make them win.
Yeah.
So Sanders is a young guy. He's exactly the type of guy that you would expect them to pick up if they thought they could make them win. Right. I feel like the first round, that was just evaluation. I don't think that teams. I think that there's a disconnect between the way the media viewed him and the way that NFL teams viewed him. We've seen that a bunch of times. We even saw it with Aaron Rodgers back in the day, where people thought he was going to be this top pick, and he kept falling in the first round. We've seen that before. It happens fairly often. After that first round, I think it was a lot of his PR team and the way that he had presented himself. We started getting a lot of reports about how he had interviewed, and if any of that stuff is true, that's the kind of stuff that turns teams off. They really don't like a player that feels entitled because they're looking ahead. They're a team. These are the billionaires that run stuff. They want a guy that they feel like they can control from a contract perspective. And if they have a guy who they feel is just gonna half-ass it and maybe not give his whole, or he's not gonna be fully dedicated to it, they're not gonna pick that guy up. Now, once it started to hit day 3, I don't know why he lasted so long.
It was weird, man.
Well, to your point about Aaron Rodgers dropping, right? Same thing. People think he's arrogant, and they were kind of right with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it did hurt the team chemistry. And with a guy like Sidor, the other thing is, any head coach that drafts him has got to be worried about Dion looking over his shoulder. I think
that clip of Dion yelling about the scouts really got people upset because you're going to be having another coach, an extra coach in the coaching room.
He's friends with the president, and he got the president to tweet about it. No team wants that. Right. Nobody.
So, Ken, I'm going to move on to round 3.
No. Wait 1 second.
Dylan,
Hold on 1 second.
The pickle.
No, 1 second. Sidor, I want to ask one more Sidor question. His RAS.
Sidor question.
He didn't test. Neither of the Sanders boys did, and he actually didn't even measure. And that's very rare. Players very rarely get measurements.
One guy who did measure and did not hesitate is Dylan the Pickle Fairchild. Why they measured everywhere of this pickle guy. Now, you're wondering, do we want Dylan the Pickle Fairchild? Yes, we do. Do we want a guy who's going to stand up to people who abuse Joe Burrow? Yes, we do. We want the pickle. And you can see him right there. He's the left guard. He looks like he moderately knows what he's doing. And he looks like, team player. Yeah.
What a lot of people don't know about Dylan Fairchild is that he's the OG from Georgia.
He is an OG. He's a good player, and we didn't get a full score on him, but he did test in the explosion metrics. He tested in the vertical and the broad. And he tested really well in the broad jump, which is what you want from an offensive lineman. Vertical is it's a good to have, but the broad is more important. That's that. When we're looking at the testing, we're looking at things that translate, right, from an athletic perspective. The broad jump is a player going from a standstill and propelling their entire body forward. That's something offensive linemen do every single play. So the broad jump has some translatable athletic traits that we can actually see. And he tested really well there. Yeah. A couple of the other players from Georgia tested really well. Georgia has a really good strength and conditioning program. Fairchild was expected to test really well.
Yeah.
So he unfortunately didn't finish all of his testing, but expectations were good, and what he did do was pretty good.
But Kent, here's me as a Bengals fan asking a question. All of this protecting, okay, Joe Burrow on one hand, I mean, who's going to be running that ball? I mean, they didn't seem like they were thinking at all about the Bengals have not thought in the offseason.
They're building a pass-happy offense, yeah.
Okay, but you can't pass every down. They didn't think at all about the run.
Well, they are going to, use Chase Brown, and they're going to use them in situations where the passing game opens it up.
All right.
So I want to give a good example that we had just from this last draft in terms of the way that it was explained, which was Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams didn't test all that well. That's not part of this. He's a very, very good player. He definitely is one of those guys that was an exception to guys that tested poorly because he didn't test all that well. He still found a lot of good NFL success. But when they looked at like yards over expectations, what you expect a running back to get versus what the O-line is actually giving him, he was basically whatever the line blocked for him, that's what he got. And if you can get that out of your running back, that's still success. That's still a successful play as long as you can get something out of your offensive play. Because it's not about how many yards your running back can get. It's how many yards your team can get. The running back, I'm sure, is very concerned with how many yards he can get from an individual perspective. They want that next big contract. They want to get those Pro Bowls and all the accolades. Yeah. But from a team perspective, all you care about is being able to move the football 3.5 yards plus per play. And if your offensive line can do all that work, then you don't have to worry so much about who you got in the backfield.
So that's an interesting take.
Yeah,
I really learned something today.
Yeah,
that's the goal. Education.
Yeah.
Kent, do you think he's ready to play right away?
Fairchild? I think Fairchild is a day one starter. I think he's ready to go day one. I'm barring any other injury stuff because I know he didn't test. I don't know if that was because of injury or whatever. But if he's healthy, I would expect him to be your day one starter. They might do that thing where they make him, he's got to win the job or whatever. But I would expect him to be the day one starter.
Okay. And he played next to Amarius on the same line as Amarius Mims, right? So
line cohesion is one of those underrated things, man. The Detroit Lions, again, my Lions, one of the problems that the Lions had 2 years ago was offensive line cohesion because their offensive linemen kept getting hurt.
Right.
So they had this entire plan to build through the run game and make everything work through this run game where they're switching between power and speed. And they had all these neatly designed plays from Ben Johnson. But the offensive line was just never the same 5 guys. It was 5 different guys every week. And that's difficult. The communication is different. Those fractions a second can be the difference between your quarterback getting sacked or your running back getting hit in the backfield. It's not a lot of time, and you want that cohesion. Having players that have played together can be helpful.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. Why would you go back to linebacker in round 4? And I like that jump. Don't get me wrong. That was a nice jump.
Yeah, so Barrett Carter's a little bit different. So he's a guy that you can he's that they were calling it the modern linebacker on the broadcast, which is a smaller linebacker generally. You're looking for speed and explosion. We've always looked at that for linebackers, but for this modern linebacker, the smaller guy, it's all about speed. And we have Bobby Wagner to thank for that a lot. A guy that people slept on during his draft and then became one of the best linebackers in the NFL. That's what people want. They want a guy that they know can run down any play anywhere on the field. And part of why they might have done that is if they do have some concern with Jamar Stewart's learning curve in being able to tackle, if they have some legitimate concerns themselves about being able to coach him up, you can do a lot worse than just putting some guys behind him that can catch up when he misses.
That's smart.
So it might just be part of a larger strategy to say, look, we know we're putting this together, and it's not just all about Jamar Stewart. But if you're thinking to yourself, we need a contingency plan in case our frontline guys aren't able to hold up, getting linebackers with speed is a good way to cover that up.
I like that. I like the pick a little bit.
Yeah.
Like the song said.
That's the day that we're on, man. I've always thought we have 4 days of the draft. Day 1 is round 1, day 2 is 2 and 3, day 3 is rounds 4 to 7, and day 4 is talking yourself into the pick day. And that's where we're at.
Well, you're not even a Bengals fan. You're talking. You should do PR for the Bengals. Okay, look.
Like a therapist. I'm helping people talk themselves into the thing.
He's facility. Okay, so we got another offensive tackle named Jaylen Rivers. Jaylen Rivers from Miami, round 5.
Yes. He's a little bit different too in that he isn't an elite athlete. The problem, we talked about this before, but the Bengals had this history, and it was funny for me because I wasn't a Bengals fan, so I got to laugh about it and not cry. But the Bengals for a long time had the least athletic offensive line in the NFL every year for years and years and years. They're not that anymore. They've been long arms. They've been changing that. They've been trying to get much more athletic on the offensive line, getting guys with longer arms, which is where Jaylen Rivers comes in. And there's something to be said about not having as athletic flaws. You obviously want the elite athletes when you can get them. But if you can't get an elite athlete, just get somebody that doesn't have a problem. And that's where you are with Jaylen Rivers. He's got average speed, but not below average. It's not so bad that you need to be really concerned about. It's not a huge strength, but it's not a big problem either. He had good explosiveness. He was just shy of that 8.0 for his broad jump. So he has good explosiveness, but it's not in that elite tier where you're just like, man, that's such a huge strength of his. He doesn't have that, but it's not a flaw either. So if you're getting guys like him in the later rounds, that's your depth guys. Just get a guy that's not going to be a liability. And I think you can develop that, especially if you're trying to get a guy that can be a swing, that can play both sides or play interior and exterior.
A swinger, they call him. Yeah.
If you can get a guy like that and he doesn't have any problems, that's a bonus for your team.
Counterpoint.
I was going to say, hold on, real quick. Kent, he looks really good. I'm kind of surprised he lasted that long.
And that's how it works sometimes, man. So a lot of these guys are and every player in the NFL was one of the best players on his college football team.
Okay, but let me please. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
I was gonna say the fail rate is so high in the NFL that like every player that's on an NFL roster could beat every college player pretty much in existence, and that's going to be the same thing with a guy like him. He's one of the best players on Miami's football team. That's why he's going to be playing in the NFL,
and hopefully he'll develop on our team. But I counterpoint to all this. So Andre Borregales from Miami was also available at this stage, Kent. Now, I don't know if you watch football, Bengals football, but we lost quite a few games because of our kicker. And I feel like the Patriots taking in the 5th round Andre Borregales, also from Miami, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. One of those schools.
One of those schools. What do you think about that? Taking a kicker in the 5th. Shouldn't we have? Couldn't we have? Why didn't we?
So this is a philosophical thing, and the Patriots.
Let's philosophize.
The Patriots also took a long snapper, which is something that most teams simply never do and never would consider. I'm not in the camp that thinks you should never draft a kicker or a punter or a long snapper. I feel like you should draft a player for need, and if you're willing to draft a kick returner in one of the rounds, even in one of the later rounds, then you should consider drafting a kicker. This is the guy that's going to get most of your points.
That's what I'm trying to say. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. Or miss most of your points. Position. In fact, one of our games, if I make it against the Chiefs, we lost because of a missed extra point, by the way. And it wasn't even a windy day.
That's all it takes sometimes. The Lions went for a long stretch where they had, I think we had 3 kickers on the roster at one point in the last 5 years. It's recent. This is something that happened recently. And they ended up picking up Jake Bates from the UFL. I think it was the UFL, one of those other leagues. He played on the Michigan Panthers and kicked like a 63-yard field goal several times. And they were like, fine, we'll give him a shot. We'll see if that works. And it did. It somehow worked. That they tried everything. Yeah. And the only thing they didn't try was drafting a kicker. But they have tried, the Lions have tried in the past in picking up a kicker, and it hasn't worked out. Some teams it's worked out when they pick up a kicker.
We had McPherson. We had an okay experience with the guy.
We have to move on. So we got a running back. Look, we have Chase Brown. We have Samaje Perine, who we love. He serves a purpose and knows what his role is. And we have Zach Moss, whose neck is. He got the sign off to use his neck again for football reasons. But then we drafted Taj Brooks in the 6th round, and this guy is very fun to watch. Very powerful, very, They say he's going to be kind of, Chase Brown is the speedster. You dump the ball off to him. This guy can power through people. I mean, these are long runs here, but we see the kind of power. What do you think? Is he going to have a role in this offense with all those running backs?
I think he can challenge for a role in that offense. I don't know if he will immediately, but this is another one of those guys that I feel like you're picking up for kind of down the road. You mentioned several guys that they have ahead of him. He'll probably make the roster, but he probably won't get a whole lot of snaps per game unless he really shines. But he's a very quick player. His agility drills were 96th percentile and 88th percentile. Very agile player, very quick, and you can see it on those plays that you're showing. He's got a lot of really good footwork when he's out in the open field. He's not slow. This is another one of those, not super fast, but also not slow type of guys. When you have a guy that's like that, you have a slower guy, but he's all power. That's great. You're going to get 3. You need 4 yards. You can get 3, But if you need 1 yard, you can get 3. So that's what you need for that role. This isn't that. This isn't a straight power guy. This is a guy that you can use for other things. And you can get him out in space and be comfortable that he can make a guy miss. And that's valuable. That's valuable, especially later in games when you really need to run the clock. And if you have a lead, trying to keep that lead, those type of guys can be extremely valuable. My Lions did that. They have one of the better running games, or pair of running backs in the NFL with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. But they also have a guy named Craig Reynolds. You probably don't know who the hell Craig Reynolds is.
I thought he sold pretzels or something.
But what his job was later in games, they would put him in when they needed a couple of yards, or if they had to get they needed to get a catch out in space, they would put him in the back because teams wouldn't expect him to be the guy that's going to get the ball in those situations.
Not with that name.
Craig Reynolds. It's the least football name. Although there was a safety or a corner, there's some defensive back picked up by the Bears in undrafted free agency named Major Burns. So it could be a lot worse.
That's a cool name.
Okay.
Not for a defensive back.
That was really good stuff. We're just going to do lightning round just with a few undrafted prospects. So as we see the clips, before it ends, we got to get the analysis. So we got, first up, we got
pressure. Bring 6, a 3 deep, 2 underneath.
Oh, this one has sound. Sorry.
Do
about
it last
that.
year.
All
Trying
right,
to
we'll
get
just
back
watch
to
this
those
clip.
ways this year. And the pass is caught.
So that is Jamoy Mays from Cincinnati.
Who in that clip was Jamoy Mays?
The receiver.
The receiver.
Okay.
Yes. So Cincinnati, obviously, there's that local connection that you guys mentioned before. I've talked about this on a couple of other programs for Cincinnati folks, but the focus on getting athletic offensive linemen, that doesn't seem to be a whole team approach. But one thing that does seem to be a whole team approach is what we just mentioned earlier about not having athletic flaws, not being a guy that's going to be a liability in any way. And his athletic profile is exactly that. He's average agility, average speed, pretty much average explosiveness and size. He's a guy that doesn't have any significant athletic flaws. He doesn't really shine in any given area, but it's not a problem in any of those areas either.
I like the part where you were talking about how also they have to use their whole butt.
Yeah.
Their whole butt, the entire thing.
Remember you were saying that? He used half the butt and then he's going to use the whole butt.
Right. Okay, next up, Jordan
Murphy
Moore.
sprint right, downfield throw. What an unbelievable.
Jordan Moore from Duke. He can catch.
He caught the ball. He caught the ball once. Can he do it again? And again and again.
That's the hope. This is a guy that does have an elite athletic profile. Jordan Moore didn't have the best top speed, but his splits were really good, over 90th percentile. Good, very good, not great, but very good explosive drills. And same thing for his agility drills, very good, but not great. A little bit on the smaller side, a little bit below average, not a lot. He's not a tiny player. He's about 6 foot 190. So not a huge player, not a tiny player. But no significant flaws athletically, and does have some of that elite, that initial explosion when he's on a run. That can be useful if you can get him out there, and of course if he can catch.
Well, we still need a third receiver. We haven't figured it out. With Jermaine Burton was supposed to be that guy, but he has some things he has to work through. Okay, Eric Gregory, defensive tackle, Arkansas. This is the last one. I like this guy. I like how he breaks through the line. He looks
hungry.
I'm surprised this guy was undrafted.
That's what I'm gonna call him if he comes. Hungry.
Kent, what do you see in him?
So he's a bigger player. He's almost 320. He's got longer arms. He's not a nose tackle. People like to throw defensive tackles kind of into two categories. You're either a pass rusher or you're a nose tackle. There's a bunch of different types of defensive tackles. He falls into a run
spectrum,
defending.
They say nowadays, yeah.
He falls more into that run defending archetype where he has good size. Maybe he's not huge like a lot of those nose tackles are, but he's got pretty good size, pretty good length. But his job is to break into the backfield, not as a pass rusher, but to defend against the run. I believe in the NFL anyway, that's going to be his role. The Lions actually drafted a guy like that in the first round, much better prospect than Eric Gregory, not to dog him, but the Lions drafted a guy like that in the first round. You want to be able to stop the run. That's not just getting a bunch of nose tackles and putting him out there. Sometimes you need a guy that can get into the backfield to prevent the running back from going out, especially on like outside zone when you have teams that run outside zone.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Because the nose tackle is not doing a whole lot in terms of preventing, like getting to the running back in those plays. He's still eating up blockers, but you still got to get the running back. And that's what his job is going to be, is getting into the backfield so that the running back can be taken down.
I like that. He has some depth there. He's just a standard defensive tackle, plug and play. I like it. Okay, so wow, I really want to thank Kent because that was
much info, man.
That was a lot. There's only a 35-minute show.
So much info,
but that was
my brain is exploding. Kent.
I
love it.
There's a good reason they call him the math.
And the positivity and
he blows up the math.
Positivity of this man.
Very positive.
When it comes to,
it's easy.
You are going to get a call from Mike Brown. I just want you to know. You're going to get a call and a check.
I was very upset with how things went at the draft. I was not happy.
I was until right now.
But
I'm glad I could help a little bit.
You know what it is, Kent? No, I'm serious. You helped us understand the reasoning. Like that.
You did.
That's what they were thinking when they made those decisions. Now
exactly.
they might. No, God knows what the future holds.
Right.
But that was what they were thinking when they made those decisions, and you helped us understand.
You did.
Now, Kent, let me ask you a question. Now it's my turn. Do you have a nephew or a young little kid in your life that you want to buy a gift for?
Everybody has a nephew they want to buy a gift for.
Okay, did you know that there's a fact? There's a fact. The fact is, Kent, that the best thing to buy your nephew is a $700 plastic helmet.
It's not plastic. These are the real deal, Kent. These are real, authentic. And we have a special code that you can use to get a discount. GreenGridiron.com. You go there, you use code Bengals1, and you are going to get a discount. What discount? Who knows? But we have, look, the $35.
It could be $1. It could be $10.
This
could
one is really popular with the nephews. The $35. If you read the reviews here, my nephew loved it. He loved it. And so there's that, but there's also
Well, he didn't love it. The person is predicting that my
doesn't matter. Here's the other thing. We have the cheaper ones.
Look how many are sold out, Ken.
They're sold out. Well, this was from a year ago. But then we also have the bumpers. First we have this one.
Look at these. These are tiny.
You can put that on your cats. You can put it. Yeah.
If you got like a pencil.
Keep your coffee warm. But then we have.
Maybe you got Stuart Little at your house.
Maybe you guys. But we also have these bumpers and Kent. I'm not even kidding. These are the official warning labels of the NFL. You can get them discounted from if you use that code and all the bumpers and all the other stuff. So that's what we have. But Kent, before we let you go, I want to say, first of all, anybody who hasn't already, make sure that you follow this man on, let me remove this banner so they can see you.
Remove that banner.
At Matt Baum. This guy, if you don't follow him, I don't know why you would use Twitter.
Math Baum,
Twitter was invented for people like him. No, I'm serious. I follow him.
I learned so much. And you presented, listen.
Can you see bookmarks? Because most of your bookmarks are from
Kent, our combined IQ is like less than 100. So you were able to explain it to us.
That's always been the goal. Is not just to you guys, but the intention wasn't to make something that I can make a ton of money on or that's going to predict NFL success 100% of the time. It was to try to make something that's easy to understand and contextualize so that we can bring new people into the sport and into the hobby of player evaluation.
I love it.
Draft.
But Ken, I'm sorry, you mentioned something. I'm going to go back to something. You talked about making a lot of money. And so we do have a Patreon. And I want you and all of your friends and family to encourage people to go here because they will be supporting us, bringing people like Kent on the show, keep the lights on, bring on Kent,
keep the
all
on.
Keeping the internet bill so I can communicate with Kent.
Keeping
if you want to
fire
support
burning,
Kent,
keeping the cold.
This is a great way. You go to patreon.com. No, but seriously, you
Kent,
will get the
people
song.
Don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
The song that you heard at the beginning of the show, That is absolutely free to download. When you go to patreon.com/DHSports and become a paid subscriber, you get that song absolutely free. You just pay. You can pay $100 a month, $50, whatever you want,
and then it's
free when you do that.
It's like
if it's free, that's a great deal.
Yeah, it's like
thank you.
You go to the gas station, you pay the man, I don't know, $100, and then all the gas you want.
Then you can clean your windshield. Then you clean your windshields for free.
You go to a restaurant, okay, and you give them $200, and then your food is free.
If only that was how everything worked.
It actually is. But listen, Kent, I want to really thank you for being on the show. This was amazing. It was so nice of you to come on the show. I hope you can come back.
Yeah,
I really do.
Come back. Yeah,
I do. That'd be amazing. But listen, I'm not even kidding. I'm going to move this banner. That's what I'm going to do for Kent because he came on the show. Go to this. First of all, get the Twitter account and then start following him and nobody else. And you're going to see yourself get smarter a little bit every single day. So thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. We don't have enough reviews. If you leave a review, good or bad, we will talk about it on the show, especially bad. Thank you so much. We will see you next time. So long, SVT.